Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. This is Coffee with Coaches. I'm Coach Reese with OMR here with Coach Loretta. And it's been a couple weeks. I mean, like we didn't get a chance to get on air last week. And man, when we don't do it every week, I just feel like, I've lost a friend for a while. But
No.
it's great to see your face. It's great to hear your voice. And, today we don't really have too much on the agenda besides getting back to our roots and talking about like where we're at, like with our athletics and with our races and what's been going on the past couple weeks, and just kind of debrief like our experience these past few weeks. Talk about maybe a couple topics that have been on our minds with just our coaching practice in the past few weeks, and just let it roll. So this episode is all about just getting back to the spirit of Coach Reese and Coach Loretta ranting online. So this is kind of like a behind baseball for us, I suppose. But
Yeah,
coach, how are you? How are
that's
you doing?
great.
What's new?
I'm good. So yeah, I love it that we get to spend time to do this because we don't always get to be with like-minded people. So, it's like something get to do out in a long run, but we get to do it from a distance. Just talk and people like are really passionate about it and we're both passionate about the sport. And so it's really nice to have these conversations, I think. But yeah. So I'm doing good though. We've been talking a lot about my journey through niggles over the last while. And I just had one more procedure because, at the Raven, I started having some issues late into the race with my heel again. So they determined I have another calcification on my Achilles. And I think that, I think it's good that we talk about it a little bit because it's something I didn't know really existed, right, until I had them. And as I've researched it, anybody can get them and they can show up anywhere pretty much. Sometimes it's in your shoulders or your knee, or mine's in my heel. And sometimes people with hypothyroidism is more predisposed to getting them, which that's something that I have. So, I wish I had known about them probably a few years ago because I think sometimes as runners, we start to just accept when we feel uncomfortable, and this is something I've felt uncomfortable with, not necessarily always during runs, but will be a post run where I'll start having some irritation. And basically, that calcification causes inflammation in my heel and then it causes pain, right? So last week I had one more series of what's called barbotage. It's like a dry, kind of like a needling, is what I think about it. And they go in and they chip away at the calcification to smooth it off so it's no longer rubbing and becoming an irritant. So what that means is about 2 days in a boot of not moving my foot so we can let it heal. And it does take, or it can take up to 12 months or so for all of the calcifications to dissolve in there. So there can be some a little bit of irritation. But what I'm super excited about is a week out from that, I was able to start running. Well, I started running sooner, but I actually did a tempo workout on Tuesday and I felt good and I was able to do strength and I felt good. So I'm hoping that I'm headed in a positive direction now.
That's wonderful. And it's been months of us talking back and forth about this and about your pains and whatnot. So it's kind of great. And you mentioned before we went on air too that like as this issue is resolved, you feel other issues resolving. Can you kind of unpack that again for us?
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting too. So I've had some issues with my low back and my QL for throughout this whole process as well. But now that I'm walking like normal again, I'm noticing all of those things are kind of falling into line. So everything up that chain is starting to go back into place, which is just like, oh wow, I can this actually happen? Can I actually be good? Because sometimes, you start getting niggles and you start questioning, like, what am I doing wrong? And it is kind of nice for me to know that it wasn't something I did wrong necessarily. It's something that, just developed and I needed to get it taken care of. And there was really nothing I could do. Whether I, well, even though I made all kinds of changes, it just didn't, it wasn't going to get rid of the calcification until I actually had it removed. So I'm actually really hopeful to see like what does that do to the rest, that low back and that QL, because I'm already seeing a huge difference in the last few days. So it's not giving me any issues when I run. So that's exciting too.
Yeah, and it's great to hear too that it sounds like you were being like an outspoken advocate for yourself. I mean, like, was there anybody that like walked you through this whole process of like, hey, like this is why you're hurting, and this is because I mean you've done months of PT, like
Oh,
on
I
your
have.
QL on your back, you've been doing a lot of dry needling, you've been doing other things on your calves, and all of a sudden to get to this point, it's not like somebody just walked you through the process. And like you said
Right.
before, like it's this. this always wanting to learn. I guess like in coaching, you can always want to learn philosophy, you can always want to learn about workouts, what other people are doing, what other communities are doing. Norwegian style of training versus like polarized style of training versus 5 zone and 3 zone models. That's great. But then when something happens to you, you turn that hunger for knowledge into like, okay, let's get to the root of like what's going on with me, because all these things aren't working. So you kind of have to be the driver of this ship, collecting other experts to try to help guide you toward the right direction. And I think that's something that like we should all take into like our own athleticism, because when we're injured, like it's so easy to get down that like rabbit hole of like, oh, well, things just like, maybe I'm just not cut out for this anymore. Maybe this just is like the end of my career. Maybe I'm just not built for this. Like maybe that was the last race I ever run. And like, I don't know, if you truly love something and, like you want to keep continuing to do it, like, I feel like that drive to keep figuring out what is wrong and getting to the root of it is going to be, the most frustrating but most rewarding thing once you come out on top. So it's good to hear that you're feeling so well.
Right, absolutely. And I feel like people really do need to think about that, like and have a good team of support. I had a physical therapist, I have a massage therapist, a chiropractor, and now the sports doc. And it also is nice because my sports doc is a runner, so he understands and he wants to get me back out there as quickly as possible. Same with my PT. And I think that, there was times that I was starting to self-doubt a lot, like, okay, what is the matter with me? Like, is everything that I've been doing wrong? Because I'm having all of these issues. And, no matter how hard I tried with strength training, mobility, taking time off and cycling, running, I mean, all of those tweaks, I just couldn't, this is one thing I just couldn't do on my own. And so getting that next person involved, which I probably should have done sooner, but we were seeing some progress. So thinking that maybe I didn't need that, but I'm like, oh, I should have done this months ago because, there was really something the matter. So I think that's one thing to think about as athletes is, if it's really not getting better over a significant amount of time, probably going and having a check. What's it going to hurt? I mean, what's the risk of going to one more person and having them, look at it and see?
Yeah, and significant amount of time too. I think can be on the order of like weeks to months. As somebody who's type A like myself, like I have a little bit of an injury right now. Not really an injury, more of a niggle that I just want to nip in the bud. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, if it doesn't get better in a day, like I'm anxious and just ready to move on about it. You know what I mean? And you kind of have to like sit with it, and sometimes just like let the body do its healing thing.
For sure.
And just trust that like, hey, you put a lot of fitness in the bank before, maybe taking a couple of days off isn't a big deal, because you like, I would personally rather take a couple of days off, or at least not running, than have to take a couple of weeks off. I had to
Right.
do that at the beginning of the year when my foot was really acting up, and like that was a bummer. So for all of us who are type A out there, like sometimes you do have to give it days, if not like a week or two, of like lowering your mileage or troubleshooting, maybe doing some cross training, or doing some like elimination things, right? Like maybe like you've been upping your vert a lot and your like Achilles is a little bit hurt, and now like it's maybe you don't have to like stop running altogether, but maybe it'll start to get better if you like reduce your volume and reduce your vert. um, Kind of a personal example from me that I could probably get into in a little bit here, but
Right.
yeah, so like just tinkering and thinking and trying to like titrate all those things, I think is kind of the grand plan of any like mastermind behind their like self-coached or like coached paradigm.
Right. And I think, you brought up some good things. So I feel like I have this with athletes that might have a little niggle here, or maybe even just an illness that takes them, down for a little bit. And then, as especially type A personalities, I think we start panicking that we're losing fitness. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because,
Oh god, for sure.
it's
Yeah,
like,
so
okay, people just don't want to take time off. And it's like, oh, this is going to really benefit you.
yeah,
Do rest and recover versus, push through it.
yeah, I have some athletes right now that are absolutely killing it. I just want to shout out Mark and Kirk. I mean, like they have been putting in the consistency. They don't have too many injuries. And when Mark told me last week, like, hey, like like I'm feeling a little rough. The knee's a little rough right now. It's like, okay, let's just cut the workout. Like let's do, if we were gonna run for an hour and do a workout, let's run for 30 minutes and just make sure that that's like nice and light. And then just like reassess next week if the workout is a good idea for you. And he did that. He cut the workout. We cut the volume of the day in half, ran 30 minutes instead of 60 minutes, like nice and easy. And then what do you know, like a week later, it's like, oh yeah, like I'm feeling pretty good. And he's got a 5 mile race that we have really good expectations for coming up this Saturday at the 5K or the 5 mile 8K that's going on in Chicago. So he's absolutely killing it there. Kirk is doing the same thing. He's upping his mileage. He's upping his vert a little bit, but he's keeping me up to speed with like, hey, what's going on with the body? And whenever something isn't right, it's like, okay, let's scale back. Like, let's
Yes.
scale back for a week. Let's not eliminate things, but let's scale back. You'll still get your runs in. You'll still get your fitness in. You're even still getting like a fitness increase. You're adding those heartbeats to the bank. So I think that like if we tell ourselves, oh, I'm missing this workout, it's the end of the world. I'm not going to get to the race as fit as I can be. It doesn't matter how fit you are at the race if you're like injured,
Right,
So
right.
those guys are killing it. And then, like coaching is always like a roller coaster, right? So we have like people over here like absolutely killing it. Things are going great. Things aren't always going to go great, right? Like, but that's why we have to keep our eye kind of peeled for things that might be going wrong. And then I have another athlete who, he gets a stomach bug after eating something weird and traveling overseas, and he's like, man, like I gotta cut all the workouts out. Like I'm really in rough shape. Like, I feel like the heaving and the travel and the one run that I did really like lit my back on fire. And like now I got a little sciatic thing, and it's like, whoa, okay, yeah, let's definitely pump the brakes. Let's build a super gradual transition. I kind of zoom out on our spreadsheets and like take a look at the weeks and like when the next race is or the next event is, and just try to like rearrange things so that way we're not just taking a complete down week and then resuming training on all cylinders. It's like, no, let's take a down week and then maybe another week or two to then build back up to where we would have been otherwise.
Right,
Um,
right.
so
Yeah,
I,
I
I,
think, yeah.
I'm sorry, go for it.
I was going to say, I think it's really great when the athlete feels comfortable in talking with us and telling us, like, I'm not feeling well. What should I do? Versus pushing through some workouts, whether it's like feeling a niggle or feeling sick. It's going to, I think, be counterproductive to go through and expect yourself to do a really hard workout or to continue your training plan when you're either ill or having a niggle, because then it's going to set you back further. So I feel like if you can kind of take the time, recover, feel better, you're not going to lose fitness in a week. I mean, if you're sick and you're down for a week, you're not going to lose fitness, so give yourself a break and don't stress about, your training. Sometimes I do have some athletes that I just have to remove everything off of their calendar because if they see it on their calendar, it's hard for them knowing that they really shouldn't be training because they're not feeling well or whatever. And so, I mean, some people don't need that, but some people do, because that's me, like type A, got to check off the things off the list. And if they're on my
Yeah.
calendar and I can't do it, it's going to be harder for me. So I
You
think
know,
that's like the value of a coach really is being able to take the time to, like you said, look at the whole picture of where they're going. There's a lot of flexibility, I think, in training plans that are leading up to events that we can, tweak. It's not like this is the only way you can do it.
oh God, yeah. And what's funny too is like when I look at that athlete who got sick overseas, when I look at his logs, it's like, well, he was already building for a couple weeks anyways. Like we
Yeah.
went from like about a month and a half ago to just doing mileage to then adding in one workout and starting to build the long run just a little bit for a few weeks. And now he's been consistent at keeping his one workout and then keeping a longer run in during the week amongst everything else that he has going on. And it's like, well, I don't wish sickness upon anybody, right?
Right.
But if it's gonna happen, this week was kind of an all right week
Right.
to have a 0 week because, quite honestly, like they'll probably see a little fitness gain just from scaling back a little bit.
Right.
Even if he doesn't feel overworked or he doesn't feel overwhelmed or like it feels like a perfectly like acceptable amount of training, it's still kind of nice just to take those resets. And
Right.
for other people, say if you're battling like like a gout flare up or like a niggly knee or something like that, or something that's not gonna like set you out of running, but maybe like it would be a little bit more wise to cross train like on the bike. Everybody knows I'm a huge fan of the spin bike. I was just on it for a couple hours this morning, catching up on some World War II documentaries that I've been infatuated by. So I used it as a learning opportunity. But so like if you have those little things that aren't completely derailing your running, maybe you take a day or two, you still collect the heartbeats, you don't have that impact of the ground. Like, I took 4 days off of running and have just been biking. And like this morning before getting on the podcast, I decided to go out for just like 2 miles, 3 miles, just to see how like my ankle and my Achilles were feeling, and how my fibularis longus, one of the calf muscles, was feeling. Um, and it felt amazing. I was like, oh my God, I feel like a superhuman running right now. So it's like I'm seeing kind of like a fitness boost just because I'm shedding a lot of fatigue that I've built up. Um, so yeah, there's definitely value in scaling back a little bit. There's definitely value in cross training a little bit. And I think it's, like it's wise of a coach to look at that big picture, because sometimes if you haven't put in the week, maybe like a down week isn't, if you haven't put in the work, maybe a down week isn't the best for you, right? But
Right.
like most of my athletes are putting in the work and then some, but they still
Exactly.
don't give themselves the opportunity to say like, oh yeah, like maybe I do need this down week. Maybe I do need the extra sleep. Like it sucks to be sick, but like, maybe I do need this. So to just have somebody to give you that permission to say like, you've been crushing it for a while. Like, don't even worry about this. Honestly,
Right.
you'll come
Yeah.
back even
It'll
stronger
be
like
fun.
next week or the following.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess maybe okay. So I've been kind of like teasing my situation that's been going on for the past like month or so. I've been really drastically like increasing my amount of vert, and I've been doing a lot of vert workouts and all this and that. And the fibularis longus is and brevis is a muscle that's kind of on the lateral edge of your fibula. It's previously known as the peroneus longus and peroneus brevis, I believe.
Who is
Um,
my friend?
what's that?
That one's not my friend.
Not your friend. Okay, so we
No.
share some of the same veins.
Yeah.
So that one, like, it just had some like tendinitis type of things going on where it's like I don't feel it during the run at all, and then I get home and an hour later my leg is bent in like a 90-degree angle or something like that, like when I'm sitting down, and it's like I feel the whole lateral edge of my leg just kind of like start to like kind of pulse and like get inflamed, and to the point where then I gotta kind of have to like move it and shake it out a little bit, So just some of those like itisy things, right? Like I can still run on it. Like it's not derailing any of my training. It's just one of those nagging things where it's like, it kind of sucks to deal with. And when I paced a half marathon this past weekend, I ran at a pace that's like completely reasonable for me, at a distance that's a completely reasonable distance. Afterwards, had breakfast with my girlfriend's family, which was a great time. I just noticed like bending to get up and down off of the ground and stuff like that, or even like sit Indian style. My leg was bent. I was just like, oh my God, like this is kind of pulsing. Like this is just dumb. Like I can completely run. It's great, but like the rest of life was just kind of like achy. So I was
Mhm.
like, you know what? Okay, we're 3 weeks away from Potawatomi. That's the next race, and by right now, it's actually more like 2 weeks. I was like, you know what? Like I can cut my mileage down to 0 miles for the week and do nothing but biking and still like get some aerobic heartbeats in the bank, take some stress off of my leg. After biking, I don't feel anything about it, right? Like it's just a great way to like get that aerobic fitness, that air in the lungs that I really love. I structure a lot of my workouts on the bike, much so like I would while I'm running. So I've still been doing like some heavy workouts on the bike, but then I get off and like nothing's wrong with my leg,
Mhm.
So then getting back up and going for a couple miles this morning, I'm like, all right, sweet. Like, I think it's okay. Still probably going to take another like down day tomorrow, maybe do a little bit of biking. I don't know. We're supposed to get some snow here, so we'll see if I can get out in the morning for a little bit. But then we're going to be doing Skunk Ape on Saturday out in, I think it's Dixon, Illinois, Lowell Park. Shout out to Alan and Lynn Tiongson, who are going to be hosting us for Friday night into Saturday and invited us to the event. We're really excited
Oh,
for it.
that's
So
good.
I have full confidence that like, I haven't really ran this past week. I ran 2-3 miles this morning, but I haven't done like a hard run, but I have confidence that like, hey, it doesn't matter if I take a couple of days off. Like my body still knows how to like go fast and go hard, and it knows how to go fast and hard better if it feels good. So
Right, right.
that'll be kind
Especially
of
when
like
I think
a
workout is a nice little
barometer.
taper,
Yeah.
like, yeah.
And then so then I thought to myself, like, hey, if this is somebody else, like, what would I have them do? And it's almost like a recovery week after a race. Like this is a recovery week for me right now.
Mhm.
And then the next 2 weeks, I'm just going to be slowly building back into the race, right? So like maybe I'll do some like hill strides, maybe I'll do some flat strides, just make sure that like, oh hey, my legs remember like how to run faster and harder again, but not do any like seriously hard intervals or whatnot, because I already put all that fitness in the bank before. So now this week, this rest week is just allowing my body to absorb all the really freaking hard work I've done the past month.
Right.
So
Right. And you'll probably see growth.
reframing, not think,
Yeah.
what's that?
you'll probably see growth from it, actually, you know?
That's what I'm thinking is like reframing that thought process into like this week being a failure into like, oh, this week is when my body gets to make change is kind of
Right.
different. My girlfriend might laugh at me as I call it a rest week because my Wahoo says that I put 200 miles on the bike for the week so far. And then I told you I was doing some workouts. So maybe it wasn't rest. It was just a cross training week for me. So I should say
Right.
that.
Right.
But yeah, so that's what's going on with me.
So that makes
Um,
me think of a couple things. So I had an athlete, I think it was last weekend, getting ready. She was out on her run, and in the middle of her run, I get a text from her saying, like, Coach, the inside of my leg is hurting. I don't think I can keep going. And so I'm like, let's, and she told me where. So I'm like, it sounds like your adductor. So I quickly went to our OMR coaching exercise library and gave her a couple things. I actually gave her the triangle pose and the twisted warrior. And she said she was out on the trail doing those, and she was able to continue her run, and she felt much better. But it was also a good indicator to her that, ooh, I need to start doing my yoga. So I think when we're thinking about these things, some things can be prevented with a little bit more focus on our mobility, to make sure that we're doing a nice job with that to keep us from there. And then I just want to share a few tools that I like to use. I know Reese isn't as much into tools as me, but I like to have lots of goodies. So one of my favorite things is the Wave tool, which
oh, that's
was
great.
suggested by Dr. Liesel. It's a really great thing. You can stick it in your vest and you can run with it. So if you get on the run and you're having something that's feeling a little tight, you can, do a little bit of 3 scrapes down, 3 scrapes up. Usually that's just enough to kind of get going. I usually use this side. So have you used one of these, Reese? And
No, so we do scraping all the time at the
like
clinic.
like Grafton, yeah,
I should say too that like this past week, even though I haven't been running and I've been doing a lot of cycling, that's not all I've been doing. Like
for sure.
personally, just a student of physiology and a practitioner in rehabilitation sciences. Like if I'm doing like I still do my sneaky fitness routines in the morning, which are like 10 to 15 minutes that like don't cause any noise. So I can do them in our apartment when everybody's sleeping. Um, but like I'm going through and putting the tissues or those two muscles that I mentioned before, the fib long and brevis, and I'm putting them in positions that when that muscle is aggravated, kind of hurt it a little
Mhm.
bit. So I've noticed that when I bend my knee and I shift like my weight kind of forward, like it puts some pressure on that area after I run, which can be kind of annoying.
Right.
So I waited until the inflammation was down. I waited until I didn't feel it. And then I started just shifting my weight into that position and holding an isometric contraction, which isometric contractions are great because they are contractions of a muscle without any movement of a joint. So it just puts tension in the muscle, makes it hold. It's really great for like tendon remodeling, for muscular remodeling. So I did that for about a day or two, and then I realized like, okay, I'm not feeling anything from this. This is great because these positions after I run are pretty tough positions for me to be in. So then what I started to do is I started to load up that isometric a little bit. I would put my body in that position. I'd hold a couple kettlebells. And then I would hold an isometric, and I did that for another couple days while maintaining like stretching and other forms of strengthening, such as eccentric calf like lowers. So all of that is to say that like when you have an injury, you can't just think like, okay, complete rest, lay off of it. I'm not going to do anything about it. A more wise position would be, okay, I'm going to avoid the aggravators. I'm going to like, of course, running was aggravating my calf. I noticed all the pain after I would run. So I'm going to avoid running. But then we can't just avoid putting the tissue in that position at any point. Otherwise, it's not going to get stronger in that position. So you got to wait till the inflammation is down and it's no longer an irritant to be in a certain position, strengthen that position so the tissue is stronger in that position. And now, like 5 days later after taking a break from running, it's like, okay, now I'm starting to feel the benefit of taking that break. And then looking forward too, right? Like how we talked about when you are sick and you're ramping back up, like when you're injured, you can't go back to say like, okay, well, I feel fine. So next week I'm going to do all the same training that I was doing. And because all that same training that you were doing is what got you injured in the first place, right? So that's when you start to modify and say like, okay, I either need to scale back up or I need to alter these workouts that were probably aggravating me in the first place.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah.
okay. So sorry, I didn't need to
That's right.
steal the,
That's right.
did
I
you have,
have a couple more tools I want to share. So
okay.
this is CBD South. It's We actually partner, Ornery Racing partners with Serenity, which is here in Michigan, which is near me. And we have this product for sale on our website. So we do have codes for athletes. So if you want a discount code, you can reach out to me. But this has been amazing for me in helping with reducing inflammation. So, as I talked about my heel that has the inflammation due to the calcification, putting that on just kind of eased some of that inflammation for me. So I really like that. And then I got my newest tool, which I really haven't gotten to use, but comes in a nice little kit, which I really like. And it is a small personal cupping kit. So I have
Ooh,
a couple different cups that are like this, and then I have some of these. Aren't they awesome?
yeah. Can you hear my clapping over the
Yes.
internet? Okay. Okay. I need to get some cups. I keep telling myself I'm going to order them on Amazon, but I purposefully
Great.
hide my Amazon app in my phone so I don't buy a lot. I need to get some cups for us because I absolutely love cupping. And one thing that we do at the clinic, which is just phenomenal, is we put cups on different body parts and we take body parts through a range of motion. Let's
Yes,
say
these ones are
if
designed so you can do range of motion and they're going to stay on, which are pretty.
Yep. So just for a quick example for people, if you have low back issues, you can put some of those cups on your low back near your L5S1, maybe go up some of the paraspinals too, and you can do some cat camels. And those softer types of cups will provide that like suction to space some superficial tissues out. But then when you contract and relax those muscles, you're just like you're altering the amount of like negative pressure that are pulling up on the muscles because of the movement of the muscles. And it feels fantastic. It's not fantastic in the way where it's like, oh, this feels so great, but fantastic in the way where it's like, okay, this might be slightly uncomfortable, but feels pretty good. It feels like you're doing something. For the hamstring, you put them on a hamstring, you do some like, you lay prone like on a table or something like that, and you do some hamstring curls. And it feels amazing for those spots that just constantly like nag at you.
Right, right.
I
And I
don't
do
know.
use them because remember I told you my QL on my left side and my low
Yeah.
back has been tight. I mean, it's improving since I'm walking better. But when
Mhm.
I got these, I tried these, and the thing is I could actually put them on my back myself because I have a few spots that are tight that are kind of pulling that left side over. And yeah,
Mhm.
like I feel so much better after I do this. So it's
Yeah. One thing that we do too, that you should try if you haven't, is getting some like massage oil or mineral oil. You put
yeah.
that on your body, and then you can put those cups on, and you can slide them across the skin.
Yeah, it came with some actually.
Oh, good,
Yeah,
awesome.
it is. So the set that I got is but through Wave Tools, and this has
Mhm.
MCT oil, beeswax, lavender, lemon, pine, mint, and eucalyptus.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm a
Yeah,
huge fan. I love that stuff. Yeah, scraping in the cups are such a like non-invasive way to like feel immediate change. So there's studies, like in for cupping in particular that show that there's like an analgesic effect, whether that's because of like the pain distraction, or because you're like manipulating a tight muscle. It also shows an increase in blood flow. That's not necessarily the redness that you see, like, under the skin. That's just kind of like, skin irritation. But nitric oxide release, like, then attracts some blood to the area, I guess you could say. But I think more than that is like when you have something on the skin and you have a sensation on the skin directly above a muscle and you move that muscle and you are putting a little bit of pull on the superficial muscle tissues underneath the skin, um, you can feel the change. And so, whether it's placebo or not, I feel like it's a method and a modality that you put it on, you do a little scraping, like you feel something change. And I think that's really powerful because even though, like, placebo effect has a bad rap to it, um, when you can feel a change, you're more likely to believe that there's change. And if you can believe that there's change, then magic things can happen. And I think, little Ted Lasso speech here, like, you got to believe in yourself. You got to believe in the tools. You got to believe in the recovery, and greatness can happen for sure. So I think, whether people believe, have used it or not, like, believe in it,
right,
believe in
exactly.
whatever recovery modality you're doing.
Right. Yeah, that's a really super good point. So we've talked a little bit about those things, but let's talk a little bit about what we have coming up.
Oh, cool. You want to go first? What do you got coming up?
Sure. So I have a race in April. It's called the Thumb Coast Ultra. It's a 50K or 50-mile relay, which I'm doing with four friends. Yeah. So it's in Bay City area in Michigan. It's a brand new race. So super excited about that. There's a 50-mile and a 50K. And I've heard that there's a rumor that there might be 100 next year, which is really cool. But this race, if you're doing the 50-mile, you're chasing sunset. So you start out at sunrise and you have to be finished before sunset, which I think is a really cool concept too. But,
Mhm.
I think talking about it, I'm doing a relay, right? So that's a little bit out of my realm of what I normally do, right? Usually I'm doing something like a 24-hour or 100-mile race. I have done relays, which I absolutely love, but it's a different mindset, right? Because now I'm doing legs of like 6 to 7 miles. So I'm talking about running a little bit faster, shorter segments, and then, planning that all out. So I thought it'd be fun to talk about it a little. So my team is four, and we can split it however we want. And so we have one our first team member, she's also supporting her husband in the 50 mile. So she's going to run the first like two segments herself. And then from there, I took the Strava elevation map and I kind of plotted out where each of the relay exchanges were so we could decide who should take which, who's stronger at hills, who's stronger at flats, and then, kind of divide that out. And then, there's so much strategy that when you're doing a relay race like this, because you can have somebody run all segments together, or you can split them up, to see like what would be better for your team. I'm running with one person that's a newer mom, so she hasn't been running as much. So, we're picking out segments that would be more suitable to her and shorter amounts, and then I'm picking up her extra miles, so it's fun.
Yeah, and I think it's a cool theme, and I think the Ragnars are pretty big on this too. Is like you get a bunch of people in a van. There's plenty of running. There's plenty of like camaraderie. I mean, you basically have a pit crew following you like with a van the whole time. So it's kind of cool because you have these like intermittent doses of like running, and then you get to come back into the into the van and hang out with everybody. It just seems like both communal as well as like a team type of effort, and I think that's something that I love running because it is like a lot of the training is like solo, right? Like we can do runs with friends, we can do group runs and stuff like that, but like to a certain degree a lot of people are going to be running alone most of the time. But
Right.
then when you get to the race, a lot of times like we're with people, but like the race is a I don't want to say a solo effort because we have our crews with us, right? But like the whole like point of like racing a race is okay. I'm going to see my crew for like a couple minutes and then I'm gone, as opposed to like okay, I'm going to run hard. I'm going to get in the van. I'm going to party with some people, and I'm going to get back out there like an hour later. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's just
Right.
it has more community involvement than an already really community based type of endeavor.
Right.
It
Yeah.
sounds
And I think
awesome.
we talked about it a little bit before. It's like, I want to do something that's fun, that's like I'm not putting so much pressure on myself. Just get back to a race that's just fun and enjoyable. So I'm excited. It's a group of people that I run with frequently, locally. So that will be fun. And, just figuring out all of the logistics of the race is also just a new piece that you have to think about when you're thinking about a relay. But there's something about when you're running and you're running with other people, it makes you push yourself more because you're like, this is part of the team. So I want to do it for the team. So another fun thing that we're doing, it's going to be a girls' weekend, so that makes it even more fun, right? So we have an Airbnb, we're going to all hang out. And we are lucky enough to have our own team doctor. So Liesel is joining us, our physical therapist, and she's our driver and our team doctor. So she's all got her stuff ready to go just in case we might need something along the way. Because she does actually work with a couple of our team members as patients. So yeah, but that's really what I'm looking forward to. And so with that, I've kind of switched up my training. I think it was just time for a change with coming off injuries and feeling like I was doing a lot of time spent in just a lot of easy, slow runs because that's what I could do. And so now I've shifted over to more of a 10K training block and I'm having a blast with it. I'm enjoying, just those quick bursts that I'm not used to and feeling like, okay, I'm starting to get my leg speed back a little bit and feeling comfortable at a faster pace. I think running at a slower pace for so long has got me locked into like this is an easy, comfortable pace, and it's hard to get out of that comfort zone. And I'm starting to do that, which is fun. And one of my team members, I've been sort of coaching her and giving her some of my workouts, and she's really enjoying it. And it's been fun kind of going back and forth with her as she's getting faster, along the way too. So it's going to be really fun. And the name of our team, like when you do these, you also have to come up with fun names, right? So the name of our team is MILF, Miles in Life Friends. So a little play on the initials, so that'll be fun too. We're really hoping to podium, so they have to announce our team.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Imagine all the spectators going, there the milks go by. um, that's awesome. And you know what, too? I think since it's a new event, do you think that like contributes to less pressure on it? Something that's more fun, right? Because it's something you've never done before. You don't have a previous to compare to.
Yeah, so you can't really go for like a PR, right? This will be my PR, right? It will be all of our PRs because we've never ran these segments. We've never run, these. I've also heard though this event, I think it might be full. There is a lot of participants. I mean, I think last I heard was like 500 or 600. It's going to be a really fun race, I think.
Yeah, that sounds like a blast. And that's was that end of April, you said?
Yeah, I think it's April 20th.
Okay,
Is
cool.
it?
We'll definitely be taking a look at all the milfs running by on 420.
Right,
Go
right.
get them. So, what do you have coming after that?
At
Anything
that
in
this
midsummer?
point, that's all I have planned. I have some things in the back of my mind for the fall, but I'm just kind
Mhm.
of figuring that out. I haven't decided yet. So yeah,
Cool. Cool,
yeah.
cool. I got one coming up that's pretty close. It's Potawatomi 50. I'm excited for it. I'm hoping for decent weather, but all the veterans of the course always tell you that like at some point, like it's gonna get wet out there and it's gonna get sloppy. So I think it's kind of like like a blue moon type of year when conditions are pretty dry. There's a couple river crossings which is sweet. I mean, like I've never done a race with a guaranteed river crossing. It's a 10-mile loop that you do 5 times. So everybody's going to get their feet wet at least 5 times. One of the rivers, it's debatable whether if the water level is high enough, you can't really hop across rocks to get to the end. But if it's low enough, you can kind of hop across rocks and be fine. So that one's fun. 50 miles. I think, from what I've seen, it can be anywhere from like 7.5 to like 9,000 foot of elevation gain, depending on like whose watch is reading it. So that would be super fun. That's why I've been doing a lot of vert focused training, a lot of uphill intervals. I had like a little Instagram story between a couple of friends going on about a particular hill workout I did that somebody else tried, and then we got more people to try it, and all of a sudden it became the challenge thing, and then Brian Simonik goes and he doubles it and puts us all to shame, and and another friend of mine, Will Kidnew, he creates another uphill workout and is sharing it with me. So I'm like, dude, I want to try it, but I'm letting my calf rest a little bit. So there's been some cool friendly banter back and forth just about, like making the treadmill a little bit less treacherous by doing some uphill workouts.
Mhm.
And for anybody else that's out there, like it's definitely been a motivating factor for me to get on a treadmill for sure. When, like you have a challenge or you have a workout that your buddy created and you're trying it for the first time and they send it back to you and you talk about how hard it is or what was easy for you or how it felt, so there's definitely been a good amount of camaraderie that's over the past couple of weeks has been getting me onto the treadmill for sure.
I love
um,
that you say that because I think that that's a really great way to motivate people. Like I'm the same way with the person that I'm sharing my workouts with. We're like comparing them. She's sending me her data. We're talking about
mhm.
them. It just makes it fun because we both kind of look forward to seeing what we can do. And this is the same thing, right? It just keeps it fresh.
Yep. A couple of them are competitors too, so it's cool to kind of like stack up, like like hey, like where are you on this workout? Like how did it feel for you? So I guess you got to be a little bit covert sometimes, giving away too much information to your competitors. But we're all friends, so it's great to see everybody succeed and try hard. And what's a hard workout for one person is fine for the next, and vice versa. And then you kind of grow and try harder workouts. And because a lot of times when you get onto the treadmill and you don't really have an idea of what you're doing, it's almost like when you're in school and you need to write a paper and you're just like looking at a blank white page. It's like, what the hell do I do with this? You know what I mean? It's like I know I can turn it on, I know I can go, but like what kind of inclines and speeds do I do? Things like that. So it's kind of cool to get templates from your buddies who are like, dude, this was a wicked workout. You got to try it. It's like I said, it's more motivating to get on the treadmill when you have something like
For
that.
sure.
And
For sure.
personally, what I really like doing is the way that I started kind of building my intervals for some of my workouts on the treadmill was I always have my treadmill set at some type of incline, whether it's 1 or 2%. just because I firmly believe that, if you set it to 1 or 2%, like you're mimicking like the demands of the road a little bit more because you don't have the belt that's like keeping you or like pulling you through, right? So like I started by putting my treadmill at 2% and then wearing my watch for my heart rate and then just seeing like, hey, at what speed am I at a pretty good like warm up for my heart rate? And then that was about like 7 miles an hour, or yeah, 7 miles an hour, seven on the treadmill. And then I would just slowly arrow it up there and just watch and see what happens with my heart rate. And then I'm like, okay, cool. So now at like a 5% incline, I'm at like just under like a tempo pace. And then as I go up to like 7% incline at 7 miles an hour, I'm at like just about like a high tempo pace. And then I go up to 9 and I'm like at a threshold pace. So it's kind of cool because then you can say like okay, I'm using incline as my proxy for what my effort is then. So it's like,
Right.
okay, I'm going to do, so like if the workout is, I got a couple, I got 20 minutes at a tempo effort and then 3 by 5 minutes at a threshold effort. It's like, okay, cool. So I know that like, I'm going to set the treadmill to 7% for this one and then 10% for this one. And then Will ended up taking that and like modifying it to have a little bit more vert and like a little bit slower speeds for him. So, that's how I started just creating my interval workouts. And
Fun. It's
you
fun.
can do that with different paces too,
Right.
or different inclines. So I think it's kind of one of those like modifiable things. And I just was glancing at my heart rate just to like see like, okay, like what does it feel like to go easy, but at like a 10% grade? You know what I mean? Or like what kind, like, am I hiking at that point or like
Right.
what's going on?
Right.
So it was kind of a cool scientific experiment.
It's fun. But that brings up something I want to talk about, threshold. So I know we
Mhm.
have a full podcast on threshold and tempo and talking about that, but I'd like to revisit it because I have people, when I'm putting that into somebody's workout, threshold pace, some people when they are getting things like intervals or fartlek workouts, not everything is all out as fast as we can go, right? So we have certain paces that we're trying to hit. And sometimes people I feel like when they're thinking of tempo and threshold, they're thinking it's much faster than it is. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you get
Oh
into
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
because
absolutely.
there's preferences for certain workouts, right? So, there are some workouts that we want you at a tempo or maybe a threshold, or maybe there are some workouts that we want you at what you would maybe think of as VO2 max, which is maybe your even like a 5K pace. So there's those different things that would kind of give you reference, I think. But I
Yeah.
think when you see that interval workout on your plan, you think you've got a full out sprint like you're on the track.
So classically speaking, the term threshold refers to your second lactate threshold. So when you look at like a lactate test, like you'll have these two inflection points where like your pace gets higher, but like your lactate doesn't really spike at all. And then you hit this like turning point where it's like it just kind of goes up slightly. And that first lactate threshold point, like your body is accumulating just a little bit more lactate and hydrogen ion than you can clear out. So that's like the first turning point. That's not necessarily like a bad thing. It just means that like your time to exhaustion goes way down.
Mhm.
So like if you're at that intensity or at that velocity as proxy, like you can't go quite as long because eventually that lactate like reading is going to end up getting so high and there's so much hydrogen in your body that it's going to bind to all the receptors that calcium can, and your muscles can't function. Everybody knows this feeling is like, oh my god, my legs are burning so bad. Like that's the hydrogen ion inhibiting your muscles ability to contract. That is measured via lactate. So this second inflection point, so we have like one little boop like that. Then we have another one called your second lactate turning point. And that's when lactate starts to accumulate more, I want to say exponentially, but it's definitely at a greater growth rate than the first turning point for sure. So now you're working at this intensity where your body is accumulating a lot of hydrogen ion and you're not able to clear it all out. Of course, your body's able to clear a little bit of it out at a time, but it's like it's your body's filling up with hydrogen ion more than it's able to clear. So classically, it's that second lactate threshold that is labeled your threshold. So between LT1 and LT2, we can say that's about like your tempo. It's like this pace that's not easy. Like your body's generating like a little bit of lactate, but it's not gonna like take you out by any means in the near future during your run. Um, but it's still not like an all day pace. It's still not a very aerobic effort. If you are operating underneath LT1, you're at a very aerobic effort, meaning that like, hey, the limiter to you going down the road is probably not going to be your metabolic ability to process oxygen. It's probably going to be something else, like you pulled a hamstring, or it's going to be like skeletal muscular. But above LT2, now we're looking into like, hey, it's probably going to be your breathing and the burning in your muscles that will eventually take you out from whatever pace you're trying to hold. But between those 2 points, that's the sweet spot where you're going pretty hard, but you're not going all out, and you're not feeling this huge spike in burn in your muscles. And as coaches, that little zone, that's what we try to tell people and convey is that's like your 7 out of 10 effort. And really, I say 7 out of 10, but maybe in my mind, I conceptualize like it's kind of like 6.5 to 7.5, depending on the day.
Yeah, that's why I said
Like
six,
if
eight.
anything, like you want to err on the easier side than on the harder side, because if you're operating above your threshold or LT2, you're going to generate a lot more fatigue a lot quicker. And that means that you're going to have a longer recovery afterwards, and not recovery in the sense of like, oh man, like you feel wiped, but recovery in the sense of like, okay, now you're burning a lot of carbohydrate, being above your threshold. You're burning a lot of carbohydrate. You're expending a lot of energy. It's something that takes more time to recover from, both like metabolically as well as your fuel system. We're burning a lot of carbohydrates at that point, and you're going to have to go home and refuel and replenish your muscular glycogen. So in my mind, I don't like, if I have somebody do a tempo run, that means that like, hey, like I don't want you crossing that like LT2 threshold. Like I don't want you to feel like you're at like above a 7.5 effort, meaning like, yeah, like you're working harder than easy, but definitely not max.
Right.
And a lot of people call that like the fun fast type of zone, where it's like, yeah, I can absolutely keep this up for 30 minutes. I can probably on a good day even hold it for an hour. But like if I have people doing tempo intervals and we're doing like, let's say like 3 rounds of 10 minutes with a 5-minute easy jog in between. If like on the third 10-minute round, if somebody's like, I just couldn't hold the pace, it's like, well, then you went way too hard.
Yep.
Because like you should be able to do upwards of an hour, if not a little bit more of that effort. Like in a race situation, you should definitely be able to do around 20 to 30 minutes continuous during training. And then if we further chunk that down and say, okay, you're going to be doing 10-minute blocks with a little bit of a break in between it, easy jogging, you should never get to the point where by the third interval, you're like gassed. So that
Right.
probably means that like, hey, maybe your RPE wasn't in tune. Maybe you were operating at like an 8, maybe 8.5 or 9 during some of those first tempos. So that's where like, trying to convey to people like, hey, where is your RPE actually at? And I think that's where like heart rate gets used as a great proxy, is you can kind of loosely tie, hey, what is about my flat velocity look like at this heart rate, and about like what do we know about what my heart rate does at this intensity. And I
Yeah.
think that's where like as a coach, I look at other people's previous performances. Like I had an athlete send me a half marathon that he did from the year before, and he was like, yeah, like that was a hard effort. Like I gave it a really good go. I felt pretty well trained going in. And then we can look at what his heart rate does and like say that like, okay, like chances are like, like your threshold heart rate is probably somewhere between like 168 to 174, somewhere
Mhm.
around there. So then we
Yep.
can say, okay, that's the heart rate intensity at which you're operating at that threshold. So
Right.
now if I give him tempo intervals, maybe I'm saying, okay, we're going to operate, 5 to 10 beats lower at max.
Mhm.
So it shouldn't feel all out, but that's how you can kind of use heart rate as like a
Yeah.
guide to, hey, like what is this effort? It's not always going to be dead on, right? Because
Right.
your heart rate takes into consideration like your sleep, or it takes into account, or I guess I shouldn't say it takes into account. It can be modified by caffeine consumption, sleep quality, motivation, illness, workouts that have come like
Yes.
beforehand. Yeah. So that's where like I use the term as proxy because it's not the definitive, like this is your heart rate for threshold. It's just,
Yeah.
this is proxy. This is around, right? So if I give
Right.
somebody then tempo intervals, we find out that like, hey, when you were well trained, like, about 168 was your threshold heart rate. I really don't want you getting any higher than 165. So let's just say like 155 to 165. Keep it
Mhm.
between there. And then when I ask that athlete, like, hey, how did that feel after you ran at that heart rate? We look at the pace and we just see what the pace did. If the pace was even throughout the whole time, we look at the heart rate to make sure the heart rate was even the whole time and we didn't see any like increases like over the workout. He goes, yeah, like that wasn't hard, but it wasn't easy. He goes, yeah, I could have done that for longer. I got done with the workout, felt pretty good. I was pretty stoked about my pacing. And it's
Right.
like, there's your tempo. That's it. Like you
Yes.
weren't killed at the end, but it was fun and you went a little bit faster than your easy paces. Like,
Right. And it's
um,
nice to be able to like just kind of ride that line, right? That's how we raise the ceiling is like riding
yeah,
the line on that edge of lactate threshold.
yeah. And that's and that's to say too, that like the word tempo is going to be defined differently by every coach. Like
Right.
some people say tempo and they mean what I would use as threshold. So I
Mhm.
guess I kind of, um, I use tempo as that fun fast, and I use threshold as, hey, let's get at or maybe slightly above that heart rate, and let's hold that for shorter intervals, because we know that, hey, like we don't want to gather a ton of time at that intensity, otherwise you're going to be pretty smoked afterwards.
Right. Right.
Um, but yeah, that's where like for everybody out there working with your coach, like have them define like what is tempo, what is threshold, because some people use tempo and they mean, hey, we're riding LT2.
Right. Right.
So that's where I think that term in and of itself has caused a lot of confusion over the past couple of years, but it doesn't matter what you call what, just as long as you define it, so that way the information the coach is trying to translate to the athlete can be understood.
Right. Right. That was a really great explanation. Thank you, Reese. And I think it will be valuable for athletes that are listening. Like, what does this mean when I get this on my training plan? So,
Yeah. What the hell is a threshold? Like what
right.
threshold? Like
Exactly.
what am I doing? So yeah, and that's something that's near and dear to my heart. And like that's where, like when you're out on your runs, you gotta be paying attention to like, like what is your effort right now? Like and
Right.
that's so we use this new platform called Run DNA to provide our training for our athletes. And that's one thing that I really like about it is after every workout, it asks you to rate it. So if I give like certain, if I give like VO2 max intervals and somebody's like, oh yeah, it was like a 4 out of 10, I'm like, dude, like you did not run these, how are
Right.
you supposed to run them? Or if I give somebody a tempo run and they're like, dude, that was like a 10, like I'm smoked, like
Yes.
can I have a rest day tomorrow? Like I'm gonna need some extra sleep. Woke up the next day, I was even hungrier than usual. I didn't get enough sleep even though I got 8 hours. Like, and it's like, yeah, man, like you ran that super freaking hard.
Yeah.
So, and I think
I
that's
like
something that
that
all
too. I
athletes
think
need to do is
that,
just keep
yeah.
checking with yourself. What
Yeah, I think
am I
that
feeling?
RPE scale is really nice to reflect back in the Run DNA too, because I found that too. Sometimes I'll see workouts that I would expect should be like maybe a 5 that come out in as an 8 or a 9, and then when that happens, that gives me a good conversation to have, right? Like, okay, it's is what made you rate it at 8 or 9? When the workout was supposed to be an easy effort. Like, why did it feel like that? I think it's brings up some really good conversation. So I think, I mean, just one last thing I want to just throw out because we're really getting past our time and Coach Reese has to go to work, is just you know what? It's getting that time to start getting ready for summer and fall races, right? So if you don't have a coach and you're interested in talking to us, reach out to me, loretta.ornerymule@gmail.com. I would love to connect you with a coach that would match your needs, that you can have a conversation with and decide if they're a good fit. And then we could move forward with some coaching to get you ready for those races. Anything to add to that?
No, that was beautiful. It was a great catch up conversation with you today. This definitely gets back to the roots of like why we started this podcast in the first place, is because we just like talking about different topics and like what's going on in our lives and stuff like that. So it was good to touch base with you again, just as somebody who is open to hearing about like all things endurance. And I can talk about this stuff all day too. So it's great to be in a space where we have that time to just nerd out about this,
For
because
sure.
the rest of the day I try to put a cap on it. Uh,
Yes, yes. So I'm just going to add a quick little story. So when I was at the Raven, 24-hour running some laps, I ran some laps with Adam Pop, and he and I started talking. Funny thing is we started talking about the podcast. I'm like, hey, I do this podcast with Coach Reese, and he's like, I listened to the one about Jacob Moss, and he said, I wondered why your voice was so familiar. And he asked me the story about like, why did you start this podcast? And I told him exactly what you just said. And then I asked him if he wanted to be on our podcast. So next week he's going to join us. He's a mental performance coach, and he's going to share some information about mental performance coaching. So I'm excited to have a conversation with Adam next week.
Nice. Yeah, same here. So it'll be good to get back on the weekly bandwagon.
Yes, yes, it will. All right. See you guys later. Take care.
Take care. Thanks, Loretta.